All right, today we're going to talk a little bit about studio design and what that means for you. So what is a studio? Let's start there, right? So a studio could be a lot of things. It could be a smartphone and a set of earbuds on the bus, like the Kendrick Lamar recording, one of his early ones. It could be a laptop and a set of headphones in a cafe. You know, if you need to record somewhere, and cafe is the only place you can go there. Awesome. Could be a computer, controller, speakers in a hotel room. You've probably seen footage of like Skrillex and Dead Mouse all just working in their hotel rooms before gigs, after gigs, whenever they can work, that's when they have to go. And if they're on tour, you know, they're not going to be at their home studio a lot of these times. You know, a workstation, sweet spot, isolation in your bedroom. This is like ideal, right? You know, a space that you already kind of control a little bit. You have a door. You are going to be constantly interrupted by external influences, ideally anyway. And you can set up your speakers in a place that's like decent to listen to, or you know, use your headphones if you have neighbors that you would bother by making a lot of noise. Of course, then there's the wall of gear studios that you've seen on the YouTube videos or online and all sorts of places like this. Maybe you've even interned at one where you just see all this amazing gear. You know, like there's a giant desk in the front and speaker arrays across above the desk on the walls, whatever they might be, and like gear, just walls of gear, like synthesizers on the walls and whatever it might be. This could all be awesome. That it could be the future of what you end up doing, but maybe that's like outside of your budget at the moment. But it's a cool place to kind of what do you call strive to. And it could also mean a recording studio could be a custom built room inside a structure with isolated power and AC. This is kind of like Andrew Huang's setup. You know, he's built an entire studio in his old garage. You know, it's a space that he can go and work and kind of be isolated from his home life, but also not be distracted in an external environment. And it's a great way to work. And really, any of these contexts are an excellent use, an excellent studio, right? But let's think about why is it that all of these are studios? We have to think about what do you need in a studio, right? What is its function, right? It's a time and space to work. It's it's the ability to make noise to a certain extent. You know, if you have headphones on, that kind of changes the context of how you can make noise or where you can make noise or how much noise you can make, because you're not really making noise that affects other people per se. It's a space that you can have some critical listening, right? So you need to be able to like make a decent evaluation of like how's this sound? Is this going to sound the way I want it to? Am I hearing things clear enough to make good choices about how, the mix, the edit, these sorts of things? So headphones are great for that, obviously, but there's certain frequencies, like especially bass frequencies, if you're making electronic music, that do not um, present very well or very consistently over headphones. And I find mixing over headphones to be a challenge at the least. There are certain things that I've become familiar with. I try to use the same exact headphones for all my mixing so that if I realize, oh, okay, there's certain frequencies that sound a little harsh or a little bright in my headphones, but on regular speakers, they're not going to sound that way. Or the opposite of that, that I'm mixing on my headphones, I can hear things very clearly. They're very crisp. As soon as I go into a conference room or a concert hall or whatever it might be, I play back my recording and it's dull. Like I can't hear the words as well. I can't hear the high frequencies as well. So I want to have a good critical listening context for my studio. I also want to be able to capture cleanly. Um, if I'm trying to produce my own sounds, my own vocals, maybe I'm making sound effects, I want to be able to record the sounds without getting a lot of the ambient background noises. Like you might hear right now, I'm in a bit of a noisy environment. There's some hiss and background in the noise. Maybe I'll clean it up with some RX, but that's extra time that I'm spending on polishing when if I had a recording studio set up where I could do my voiceover cleanly, that'd be kind of nice. Now, I don't really have all my computer set up in a studio at the moment, but that's something to be thinking about. It's like, that's what's making all the noise. I have computers running graphics and stuff like this in the background with fans hissing and all this sort of stuff. Another thing to be thinking about in your studio is ergonomics. You're going to be probably sitting, standing, working in this studio for hours upon hours upon hours, and that can have um, kind of an effect on your body. It can also have an effect on your like mood, how productive you really are. And if you're working solo and in groups, that's going to change the implications of how you need to think about ergonomics. Then there's aesthetics to be thinking about. What's the vibe of the space you're in? what kind of vibe are you looking for? Like, do you need like a sort of chill vibe to get in the zone and really like make your music? Or do you need like a busy, aggressive vibe? What is that vibe? What is it that's going to be the most productive for you? So let's jump into some kind of physical layout things having to do with critical listening. So in a critical listening context, you're going to want to have this kind of ideal placement of two speakers that reach the ears kind of in this very particular way where you can have a very clean stereo image. There are papers on this. There's rather precise angles of to be concerned about here, but the ballpark is you want these speakers to be a little more than arm's length away and kind of out at the sides. So like if you kind of just made a V, with your body being the center here and just put your arms out like this, that's roughly where the speakers should go. Like on either side of your monitor, your video monitor should be all good in that sense. Now, that's just arbitrary speakers relative to you. There is also the challenge of speakers relative to your space, because I'm pretty sure all of us are listening, are kind of doing things in different like rooms. Now, if you're like me, and you kind of cram all your production stuff into one part of your bedroom, you might find yourself crammed in this corner, which is going to create a couple of issues when you're mixing. The other corner that we might have is this sort of thing where it's like we're kind of cockeyed in the room, things are not symmetrical. There's some math out there that shows that like an ideal space might be something like this, where there's no like parallel reflections of high frequencies. The sounds would kind of bounce off the walls and miss your head. The absolute worst thing, of course, you could possibly have is a circular room, because the reflections will bounce everywhere. You'll get all sorts of weird artifacts and weird sort of things. But let's presume that we're in some sort of like normal rectangular room, right? It would be nice at least to be symmetrically placed in the room, so you are your reflections off your walls are relatively even, so that a sound coming off this side is going to reflect off of this wall. Let me draw it out on the screen. The sound's going to reflect off of this wall and hit your ear, and the sound might reflect off this wall and hit your ear, and likewise the sound could be bouncing off here and then all the way over here. And if it's relatively even, you're going to be able to kind of have an even response on both ears and be able to kind of adjust to what your room sounds like. Now, if you have the space available, it would be nice if you could move the speakers off the wall. So you put some distance between the back of the speakers and the wall, so that you are not getting any weird reflections, especially low frequency kind of reflections off the back of the speaker hitting the wall and then coming forward and creating phase cancellation and other sorts of artifacts that could kind of alter the true sound of what's going on. If we were being super ideal and we were in a rectangle room, we would want to put our speakers such that they're off the wall and that we are in the room kind of sideways. So instead of the long, facing within the long view, the long way of the room is this way. So we're sort of in the short view of the room. This will reduce the number of reflections, the amount of reflections that can hit from the side of the come out of the speaker, hit the sidewall, and still reach our ears. It just cuts down on the amount of surface area that's reflecting in that direction. We do have the issue of front to back reflection, but that is relatively easy to deal with in even kind of even, smooth way. All right, so presuming that we are in my like super ideal placement of speakers, now let's think about treatment. You've probably all been in a room that is super echoic, like a bathroom or something like that, a tile bathroom, any sort of like a church, a temple, any place that's all stone walls and these sorts of things. You're going to have lots and lots of reflections, and that's going to color the sound that you get out of your speakers. So let's consider what we can do to the room to make it so we're not creating so much reverb and altering our sound so much, because we've taken the time to place our speakers in the room in the most ideal way possible. So then let's see what else we can do to get the room to sound great. So one of the first things we'll do is throw some sort of bass treatment in the corners towards the front. This could be anything with some mass and that's kind of curved. A lot of people like using potted plants because you both get the plant and you get the, which is nice for a certain aesthetic, and you get the round massive thing that's actually cutting out some bass frequencies. There are bass traps if you like the kind of more, what is it, just utilitarian aesthetic of just like some sort of black foam object in the corner. If you can afford it, put them in the back too. The next thing that we want to make sure we have is some sort of diffusion. I love using bookcases and books mounted on walls for diffusion because one, it's a bookcase with lots of books on it has some mass, so it's going to reduce some of the bass frequencies that are resonating in the room, also reduce what's getting transmitted through the back of the wall. And books, especially like a collection of books that are all kind of different shapes and thicknesses, that's going to create a beautiful diffusive surface. Now, a surface that's going to diffuse the sound is going to have an uneven surface. Think of sound diffusion like reflection of a like mirror. So if you have like a sheet of aluminum foil, like when it comes fresh out of the roll, it's relatively reflective. It's not like perfectly like a mirror, but if you crumple it up, it's no longer kind of providing a uniform reflective surface. It's all, reflecting in different angles, and that's what we want to do with the sound. We don't want the sound to be able to bounce back off the wall and hit your ear like a perfect mirror reflection. You want to have the sound break up and diffuse so that it kind of dissolves into the background. All right, so we've got the bass trap thing. We've got a little bit of diffusion on the back of the room. The next thing to be thinking about is high frequency response in the sides, because we want to reduce as much as we can the echo that comes directly off of a flat wall and into your ear. So if diffusion would be great for a lot of frequencies, but what I found is, and a lot of folks have found, is that high frequencies and these little spots really most of what you need to treat in terms of high frequency. You don't need to go crazy and cover your whole wall with acoustic treatment and foam. It's really not productive to have a room that's totally dead. It actually kind of plays weird tricks on your ears. It actually will, like I find when I go into a room that's totally dead, I hoarse my voice a little bit because I can't hear myself quite as well in the what is it, anechoic response of the room. So I need some liveliness in the room, some reflectivity off the walls, but not the ones that are right between you and the speaker, right? We don't want to get this reflection built up too much. It creates some noise in our perception of things. It can also create filtering and phase cancellation, which we want to avoid. Finally, the last thing we can be thinking about is a floor and ceiling treatment. So for floors, the easiest thing is you throw some carpeting down, right? It provides like a cool vibe. It also reduces some reflections on the floor. It actually reduces some of the sound that gets transmitted through the floor. And if you're really up for it, mounting some sort of cloud, some sort of reflective, or not reflective, absorptive materials on the surface of your ceiling. You've probably seen studios where like they'll have even just like a piece of plexiglass with some slots cut in it will provide enough diffusion to make it so your ceiling isn't just reflecting sounds directly. The sound comes off your speaker, goes up and hits the ceiling, hits your ear, you're getting some reflections. A lot of ceilings are, if they're not made out of like kind of sheetrock or flat materials, you might find there's some sort of diffusive or absorptive stuff. I'm looking at my office ceiling here. It has some sort of patterned kind of foam core looking stuff up there that knocks down some of the sound and keeps the reflections to a minimum. So you have yourself a beautifully treated room, but the reality of a room is that no matter how much treatment you put, there are still going to be some physics of the room reflections. There'll be some boosted frequencies, some attenuated frequencies, just it's the nature of the physics of your room. So what can you do about that? Well, if you have yourself a proper PA system or proper sound system, you will want to have the ability to tune it. So tuning a room, the bare bones basics of it, you play some pink noise through the speakers that are in your room, and you get a RTA, real-time analyzer application on your phone. It's not totally perfect, but it's totally good enough to get a sense of like, oh, I have a couple frequencies that are a little bit problematic. There's some really bright resonances wherever I am in the room at 1K or 500 or 120, whatever it might be. You just want to know where those things are so that you can maybe treat for that. Um, maybe adding an equalizer to the output of your entire system so that you can tune some of the problematic frequencies that might be present in your room, so that you have ideally something a little more flat. That way, if your room, well, let me just tell you a story of problems I've run into. I was in a recording studio a few years back that had a resonance around B flat, and we were playing, we're doing the recordings and stuff like this, and I was like mixing, and I was like, oh, that B flat, it was just we were all in the control room, the producer, the performer, and myself. We were in the control room trying to figure out why on earth this B flat was just like hitting us so hard in the heads. And what we ended up doing is just like EQing out that particular frequency. Like we just grabbed an EQ knob and just turned it down. And then we took that recording out and we played it in several other places, and we were like, oh, yeah, it wasn't that instrument, because some instruments have hot spots on them. It wasn't that instrument. It was that control booth was very resonant at B flat in particular, and we just didn't notice it because the other instruments in the song didn't have as much bass frequency. It was just the one electric bass in the song. Once we knew that that room was resonant at that frequency, we just learned to kind of ignore it. We adjusted the EQ only on the listening EQ, not on the part of the processing that was going to be rendered into the recording. That allowed us to, even though we had a weird peak in our acoustic space, we knew that we didn't have to worry about it too much in the recording space once we attenuated the speaker system a little bit. So, what about clean capture? What can we do about that? Well, again, we don't want to go totally crazy with isolation, though. If you are stuck in a noisy environment, or like you have you're building a voiceover studio in your garage and you don't want to, build it from scratch, you can get these booths that are just like totally surrounded in foam. I find that those are probably, at least for me, they're problematic until I put my headphones on and I have to get a special feed of my voice back into my headphones so that I hear myself clearly, so I don't like get all hoarse like this. So if I want clean capture and I'm kind of building my own studio and I don't want to go crazy on buying a booth or something like this, I just need to get a little bit of absorptive material and put it in this configuration where it's capturing all the reflections that might be coming back into the room. So I'm speaking, if the booth is small, I want to have something absorptive and diffusive towards the front of me, and I want to have something definitely absorptive behind me. Blankets might work, foam core, whatever, or foam padding, whatever it might be, it's going to get you that reduce reflection, reduce any noises that might be coming in from outside of the studio. If it bounces off the wall, or if it hits this wall and gets absorbed, it's not going to bounce and then go back into the microphone. Right. You'll notice that if I'm using a microphone without a like pop filter or something like this, I'm probably going to want to have that microphone pointed down a little bit, because all my plosives and things like this are going to go out and down from my mouth and nose. So I don't want the microphone below me pointing up like you would in a regular stage situation. You'd have the microphone here. That can be a little bit problematic in recording because you might get pops like pop, might get this sort of garbage, which is no fun in a recording. It creates an editing nightmare, and it's not necessary if you simply move the microphone up and out of the way. The other reason I often will put a microphone up and out of the way is, what if my singer or voiceover artist needs to be reading off of sheet music or a stand for notes? If the microphone is down low, now I'm kind of like tipped down, and now like there's stuff in my way. Especially if you have a pop filter, if it's not one of those little cute little shields that wraps around the microphone, if it's like one of those larger things, it might block the view of the artist trying to see the sheet music or the notes or whatever it might be. So if you can get that mic out of sight lines, that is awesome. And also, if you're doing film voiceover, most of the time the microphone in film recording is out of frame and up in the air. The boom microphone is like just out of frame above the actors. And if you're trying to reproduce that same sound from the sound stage, obviously you want to have the same mic if possible, but you also want to have that mic pointed above the artist and at approximate distance, similar distance, so that you get the most consistent sound. And if you are going really high above the artist, you may want to find yourself a little bit of absorptive material down here in the corner floor area. I always love to have some sort of carpeting in my voiceover booth, partially because of the vibes. It's like just like a nice texture to see instead of like, blah, gray or wood floor or whatever it might be. But that's just me, I guess. All right. Other things to consider, ergonomics, for example. If you are working alone, solo style, you're going to want to place your instruments such that you have easy reach to all of them. And of course, I'm usually a sound mixer, so I am the guy who puts the mixing console front and center. If you're a composer, you might put the piano keyboard front and center. And if you're like kind of a beat programmer and editor, you might put the mouse and keyboard front and center. But either way, it's really just kind of up to you how you're going to work and how you're going to work best. Also, you might think about what role are you playing if you're working alone? What role are you playing at the given moment? If you want to be focusing on composition, don't put the mixer right in front of you. Put the more put the compositional stuff in front of you. Again, this is going to be something that you'll develop over time as you figure out what's the best way to lay out this stuff so I can be most productive and most focused. And that's, of course, if you're working alone. If you're working in a group, you might find yourself wanting to lay out your stuff so you have, everyone can kind of hear relatively well, and you have, a station set up for composition, a mixing station, and an editing station. Right? That's just kind of a fun, clear way to go about things. Some other concerns with ergonomics have to do with the fact that you might be sitting for like hours upon end. A lot of us have talked about, gosh, like the physical damage that happens to your body from just sitting all the time. So you might want to get yourself into a situation where you have the ability to stand some of the day. Standing desks are not too terribly expensive. They might be a little bit cumbersome if you have like your keyboard and your other things all kind of laid out on the same desk, but it's certainly something worth looking into. When I build my next studio, I want to design it such that there's at least one standing desk, if not for myself in the mix position, for the producer position or something like that, so I can switch over and stand part of the day, because sitting in front of the mixing desk, sometimes I get just like frustrated or fatigued, and I think it's about the work, because sometimes I get stuff that's like, oh, I really would have edited that different, but I don't have a choice. I'm just mixing at this point. Fresh might just be my body saying, hey, get up. Have time to while I'm like this, have stand and keep look like. There's this kind of funny thing that happens when you put foam on the wall. Is it looks so cool at first. It's like nice clean lines, everything's dry, and then like a few years go by, and suddenly everything just looks like garbage because the foam starts to break down, and you move gear in and out of the room. Like pretty much every studio I've worked in that lines their walls with the foam stuff eventually ends up with things that looks more like this. So unless you're willing to replace, $10,000 worth of foam every couple of years, I tend to try not to use foam. At least now, moving forward, now that I'm making decisions about what goes on the walls, I'm going to avoid foam whenever possible, unless it's like a very limited area that isn't going to get direct contact. So other things to think about with aesthetics are things like, what's the vibe of the room, right? Do you need like a minimalist kind of black and white vibe? Do you want to light the thing up? And if you're doing like video game music, something like that, or certain styles and genres of music, you might want to light the place so it's like got some intensity, right? So it really kind of gets you in the vibe. Anyway, question that I love asking, like, do I need more stuff? Well, ultimately, that is up to you, right? Like we said earlier, like headphones, iPhone, in a on a bus, you can still make great music. So, you know, it really depends on what you need to do next to advance your game. You don't have to start with the top of the line $9 million studio to make a cool song. You know, Billie Eilish and Phineas made Grammy Award winning pop music in Phineas's bedroom, right? Um, Kendrick Lamar won a Grammy on a project that he produced on an iPhone and GarageBand while traveling. You don't necessarily need more stuff, but if you are going to grab more stuff to make your workflow better, these what we kind of covered in these slides are just some strategies about how you might go about doing that so that you don't have to go absolutely crazy. So with that, since we're kind of out of time, I will skip the questions portion and we'll just wrap up. Email me if you do have questions. You probably know my address. It's langdon@nyu.edu. All right, talk to you all later.